Hyunjin saw Felix's suitcase before he heard the words, and somehow that silence hurt more than any goodbye ever could. The rain had already begun to fall outside the dormitory windows, tapping softly against the glass like thousands of restless fingers. The city lights beyond the street blurred into streaks of gold and red, but Hyunjin could only stare at the black suitcase standing near the front door. Felix was kneeling beside it, carefully, quietly, as if every movement had been rehearsed 100 times. Felix. The name left Hyunjin's lips as nothing more than a broken whisper. Felix stopped. For a moment, the entire world seemed to freeze. No music from the living room, no laughter from the other members, no sound except the rain. Then Felix slowly stood up. His shoulders trembled ever so slightly, though his face remained hidden. "I'm leaving tonight," he said, just that, no explanation, no warning, no reason. Hyunjin felt his heartbeat slam violently against his chest. "What do you mean? Leaving?" The question sounded ridiculous even to himself. Leaving where? Why? For how long? Felix finally turned around. His expression was unreadable. The sunshine that usually lived inside his eyes had disappeared, replaced by something distant and exhausted. "Need some time alone." Hyunjin laughed, not because it was funny, but because his mind refused to accept reality. "Stop joking." "I'm not joking." The words landed like shattered glass. Hyunjin took several steps forward. "Something happened." Silence. "Someone hurt you." "Nothing." "I do something wrong." Felix looked away, and that hurt more than any answer. The hallway suddenly felt unbearably small, too quiet, too cold. Hyunjin swallowed the lump forming in his throat. For years, Felix had been the person who stayed, the person who listened, the person who smiled even during difficult days. Whenever Hyunjin's thoughts became too dark, Felix had always found a way to bring light back into his world. So why was he leaving without a single explanation? The rain grew heavier, thunder rolled somewhere far away. Hyunjin clenched his fists. "Look at me." Felix remained silent. "Please." Finally their eyes met, and Hyunjin immediately understood something was terribly wrong. Felix looked tired, not physically, emotionally, the kind of exhaustion that sleep could never fix. The kind people hide behind smiles, the kind nobody notices until it's too late. "I can't explain it right now," Felix whispered. "Then when?" No answer. "When will you tell me?" Still nothing. Hyunjin felt panic crawling beneath his skin. For someone who always spoke through emotions and colors and movement, silence was the cruelest language imaginable. The silence felt endless, until Hyunjin finally broke. "Are you coming back?" The question escaped before he could stop himself. Felix closed his eyes. A small, painful smile appeared on his face. "I don't know." World shattered. Hyunjin looked down, pretending to adjust his sleeves. He couldn't let Felix see, not now, not like this. His vision had already begun to blur. The tears waited stubbornly behind his eyes, threatening to spill over at any second. He hated crying in front of people. Felix knew that better than anyone. Felix had always been the only person who could tell when Hyunjin was hurting without asking questions. Yet now, Felix stood there like a stranger, preparing to disappear. The scent of rain drifted through the open balcony door. Cold wind touched Hyunjin's skin. He remembered another rainy night years ago, back when everything felt simpler. Back when Felix had found him sitting alone after a difficult performance. Without saying a word, Felix had sat beside him and shared a pair of headphones. No advice, no speeches, just quiet companionship. That had always been Felix's greatest gift, being present, which made his absence even more terrifying. Hyunjin inhaled deeply. "If you need help, we can solve it together." Felix remained motionless. "We always solve things together." A flicker of emotion crossed Felix's face. Pain, regret, longing gone in an instant. "Some things," Felix began softly, "some things have to be faced alone." Answer made no sense. And yet it sounded like something Felix had convinced himself to believe. Hyunjin wanted to argue, wanted to shout, wanted to demand answers, but beneath the confusion was fear. A terrible fear that pushing too hard would only make Felix leave faster. So instead, he asked the question that mattered most. "Why didn't you tell me before today?" Felix looked at the floor. "Because if I did," his voice cracked, "I don't think I would have been able to go." Confession pierced straight through Hyunjin's heart. Everything suddenly became worse. Because it meant Felix had been carrying this burden alone, for days, weeks, maybe longer, smiling, laughing, living beside everyone while secretly preparing to disappear. How lonely must that have felt? The thought made Hyunjin's chest ache. The rain continued endlessly. Water streamed down the windows like tears. Neither of them moved. Time itself seemed reluctant to continue. Then Felix picked up his suitcase. The simple action felt catastrophic, real, permanent. Hyunjin instinctively stepped forward, his fingers curled around Felix's wrist, warm, familiar, fragile. "Don't go." The words emerged as little more than a whisper, not dramatic, not desperate, just honest, pure honesty. Felix froze. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Hyunjin kept his head lowered, his shoulders trembled. The tears he'd been fighting so hard against finally gathered at the corners of his eyes. He blinked repeatedly. Refused to let them fall. He couldn't. If he cried now, Felix might stay out of guilt. And Hyunjin never wanted that. Love that remained out of obligation wasn't love at all. So he forced himself to breathe, forced himself to stand, forced himself to let go. When his hand finally released Felix's wrist, it felt like losing something precious forever. Felix turned toward the door, one step, then another. The sound of his shoes against the wooden floor echoed through the dormitory. Hyunjin stood motionless, his nails dug into his palms. The tears remained trapped inside, burning. The door opened. Cold evening air entered the room. Felix paused. Without turning around, he spoke one final time. "Thank you," his voice trembled, "for always being my home." And then he left. The door closed softly. No dramatic slam, no loud goodbye, just silence, the kind of silence that changes everything. Hyunjin remained standing in the hallway long after the rain had stopped. The city lights continued shining outside. Life continued moving, yet something fundamental had shifted. Slowly he sat down on the floor. The place where Felix's suitcase had once rested now stood empty. The emptiness seemed enormous. Memories flooded his mind. Late-night conversations, shared meals, stupid jokes, comfort during difficult days, promises that neither of them had expected to break. His heart hurt in ways he couldn't describe, but beneath the sadness was another feeling, understanding. Because deep down, Hyunjin knew Felix hadn't left because he stopped caring. Sometimes people disappeared precisely because they cared too much. Sometimes love meant protecting others from storms nobody else could see. The realization didn't make the pain easier, yet it made the silence feel less cruel. Hyunjin finally allowed a single tear to escape. It rolled down his cheek before disappearing into the fabric of his sweater. Only one, just one. The rest remained hidden. Just like everything Felix had never found the courage to say, morning arrived without permission. Sunlight poured through the dormitory windows as if nothing had changed, as if the world had not quietly broken apart the night before. Hyunjin hated that. He hated how ordinary everything looked. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee. The television remained on mute. Felix's favorite mug sat beside the sink exactly where he had left it, yet Felix himself was gone. Hyunjin stood in front of the refrigerator for several minutes, staring at nothing. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard those final words again. "Thank you, for always being my home." The sentence replayed endlessly in his mind. It wasn't goodbye, but it wasn't a promise to return either. Footsteps approached. Bang Chan entered the kitchen, his expression exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He too hadn't slept much. "Been awake all night?" Hyunjin didn't answer. Chan sighed. The silence itself was enough. The leader walked toward the counter and prepared 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Hyunjin. The second cup remained untouched. "He tell you anything?" The question hung heavily between them. Hyunjin shook his head. "Nothing." Chan leaned against the counter. "He didn't tell me either." That surprised Hyunjin. Felix always confided in Chan, always. If even Chan didn't know, then whatever Felix was carrying had been far heavier than anyone realized, or perhaps he had deliberately hidden it from everyone. The thought made Hyunjin's chest tighten. A sudden memory surfaced. 2 weeks earlier, they had all been eating dinner together. Everyone had been laughing about old trainee stories. Everyone except Felix. He had smiled, nodded, participated, but his eyes had seemed distant, like someone watching life through a window. At the time, nobody noticed. Or maybe they simply chose not to, because admitting something was wrong would have been frightening. Hyunjin hated himself for that. He should have known. He should have seen it. Chan placed a hand on his shoulder. "This isn't your fault." The words sounded gentle, yet Hyunjin couldn't believe them. "If I had paid more attention." "You did pay attention." Hyunjin looked up. Chan's expression remained firm. "You care about him more than anyone." "Then why didn't he tell me?" The question emerged before he could stop it, raw, broken, painfully honest. Chan didn't answer immediately. Outside, birds sang in the morning air. The sound felt strangely cruel. Finally, Chan spoke. "Sometimes people stay silent because they don't want the people they love to worry." Hyunjin laughed bitterly. "That doesn't make sense." Chan admitted. "It doesn't. Truth hurt. Love should mean sharing burdens. Trust should mean asking for help." Human hearts rarely followed logic, especially when pain became too overwhelming. The conversation ended there. Neither of them had answers. Hours passed slowly. The other members eventually woke up. The atmosphere inside the dormitory felt different. Quieter, everyone moved carefully as though afraid that speaking too loudly might make reality more painful. Nobody mentioned Felix directly. Nobody needed to. His absence filled every room. At lunchtime, Han unconsciously prepared an extra portion of food, only realizing his mistake when he placed the plate on the table. The entire room fell silent. Nobody touched it. Nobody moved it away. It simply remained there, waiting. Hyunjin couldn't bear looking at it. He returned to his room. The familiar scent of paint and sketchbooks surrounded him. Usually, drawing helped him organize his thoughts. Today, his hands refused to cooperate. He sat by the window instead. Rain clouds still covered the city. The weather mirrored his emotions perfectly. His phone rested beside him. No messages, no calls, nothing from Felix. A part of him kept expecting a text, something simple. "I arrived safely. I need more time. Don't worry about me." Anything, but the screen remained empty. Hours turned into evening. The loneliness became unbearable. Without thinking, Hyunjin opened their old message history, years of conversations. Thousands of memories trapped inside tiny digital bubbles, pictures, voice notes, random jokes, encouraging messages before performances. Late-night confessions about fears and dreams. One message caught his attention. It had been sent almost a year ago. "Felix, if one day I disappear for a while, promise me you won't hate me." Hyunjin's heart stopped, his fingers trembled. He had completely forgotten about that conversation. At the time, he thought Felix was joking. His own reply appeared underneath. Hyunjin, impossible, I'd find you anywhere. A smiley face, a silly sticker, nothing serious. Because neither of them expected that moment to become real, tears threatened to return. Hyunjin quickly locked his phone. The room suddenly felt too small, too full of ghosts. Night arrived once more. The city lights illuminated the darkness outside. The members gathered in the living room. Nobody turned on the television. Nobody played music. They simply existed together in silence. Then Sumin spoke. Do you think he'll come back? The question shattered the fragile peace. Nobody answered immediately. Because nobody knew, Changbin stared at the floor. Lino folded his arms and avoided eye contact entirely. Finally, Chan spoke. Yes, certainty in his voice surprised everyone. Can you be so sure? Sumin asked softly. Chan smiled, a tired, bittersweet smile. Because Felix always comes home. Statement lingered in the air, beautiful, hopeful, yet uncertain. Hyunjin wanted to believe it more than anything, but fear had already planted itself inside his heart, fear that people changed. Fear that sometimes home stopped being enough. Later that night, unable to sleep once again, Hyunjin wandered into Felix's room. Nothing had been touched, everything remained exactly as before, the books on the shelf, the scattered Polaroids, the small plush toy Felix kept near his bed. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, soft, silver, melancholic. Hyunjin sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress still carried traces of warmth in his imagination. He closed his eyes. And for a brief moment, he could almost hear Felix laughing. Almost, then something caught his attention. A notebook hidden beneath one of the pillows. His heartbeat accelerated. Slowly, carefully, Hyunjin picked it up. The cover was simple, black, worn at the edges. It belonged to Felix. He hesitated. Reading someone else's private thoughts felt wrong, but Felix was gone. And Hyunjin desperately needed answers. The first few pages contained ordinary things, song lyrics, random sketches, ideas for future projects. Then near the middle of the notebook he found something different, words written in a trembling hand. If I stay like this, I'll only become a burden to the people I love. Hyunjin froze. The next sentence hurt even more. They deserve the happiest version of me, not the broken one I keep hiding. His breathing became uneven. Page after page revealed emotions Felix had never shown anyone. Fear, exhaustion, self-doubt, loneliness, all hidden behind endless smiles. And at the bottom of the final page was a sentence that made Hyunjin's entire world stop. I hope Hyunjin never discovers how much I wanted to ask him to stop me from leaving. Notebook slipped from his hands. Silence filled the room, a terrible, heartbreaking silence. Because suddenly, Hyunjin understood something. Felix had wanted someone to save him. Yet at the same time, he had convinced himself that nobody should. And now, somewhere beneath the same night sky, Felix was carrying that loneliness completely alone.
3 days passed, 3 painfully long days. The world outside continued moving as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Cars filled the streets. Fans posted cheerful messages online. The summer breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked trees through the city. But inside the dormitory, time had become something heavy, something that refused to move forward. Hyunjin barely slept. The notebook remained hidden inside his drawer. He had not told the others what he found. Not because he wanted secrets, but because the words inside felt too fragile, too personal. Every sentence Felix had written carried wounds nobody had seen, and Hyunjin couldn't bring himself to expose them. Late one evening, he found himself standing in front of the large window in the practice room. The city lights shimmered below. His reflection stared back at him, exhausted, unfamiliar. He looked older somehow. The door opened quietly. Lino entered. Unlike the others, he didn't ask questions. He simply sat beside Hyunjin. The silence between them was comfortable, honest. After several minutes, Lino finally spoke. You blame yourself. It wasn't a question. Hyunjin smiled bitterly. Shouldn't I? Lino leaned back against the wall. No. Answer came immediately. Why not? Because people don't disappear overnight. Hyunjin looked at him. Lino continued. Whatever Felix was carrying, it existed long before he packed that suitcase. The words settled inside the room. Heavy, true. Hyunjin remembered all the little moments. Felix staring out the car window during schedules, the forced smiles, the times he said he was tired but insisted everything was fine, the nights he stayed awake alone. They had all noticed something, just not enough. Or maybe they simply believed love alone could heal everything. Unfortunately, some battles happened in silence. Some storms lived entirely within the human heart. Lino stood up. Before leaving, he paused. If he left to protect everyone, then the only thing we can do is wait until he believes he deserves protection too. Door closed behind him. Hyunjin remained alone, yet those words stayed with him. That night, unable to rest, he opened Felix's notebook again. This time he read every page carefully. There were happy memories, little observations about everyday life, funny stories, dreams about the future, and hidden among them, countless moments of uncertainty. One page caught his attention. The date was from 6 months ago. Felix had written, "Sometimes I wonder if people only love the version of me that smiles all the time." Hyunjin's throat tightened. Another sentence followed. "I don't know who I am when I'm not making everyone else happy." Handwriting grew shakier. "I wish I knew how to ask for help without feeling guilty." Room felt unbearably quiet. Hyunjin closed the notebook. His chest hurt, not because Felix had left, but because Felix had suffered alone for so long. The realization was devastating. The next morning, Bang Chan gathered everyone in the living room. His expression was calm, more determined than before. "We can't keep waiting without doing anything." Han looked up. "What do you mean?" Chan folded his arms. "We find him." The words stunned everyone. Changbin blinked, but he wanted space. "I know," Chan nodded, "and we'll respect that." Leader paused, "But respecting someone doesn't mean abandoning them." Silence followed. Hyunjin felt something shift inside his heart. Hope, small, fragile, yet real. Chan continued, "We don't force him to come home. Don't pressure him. Simply let him know that no matter where he is, he's not alone." Others slowly nodded. For the first time in days, the atmosphere felt lighter, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Later that afternoon, Hyunjin decided to do something he had avoided. He visited the small riverside park where he and Felix often went after difficult schedules. The air smelled fresh after the rain. Children laughed nearby. Couples walked beneath rows of green trees. Life continued. He sat on their favorite bench. The wooden surface felt familiar. Memories flooded back immediately. Felix buying too many snacks. Their endless conversations about art and music. The comfortable silences that required no explanations. Hyunjin closed his eyes. And suddenly a memory emerged. Months ago, the same park, the same bench. Felix had looked unusually serious. "Hyunjin, yeah, if one day I become someone different, would you still stay?" The time Hyunjin laughed. "That's a stupid question." Felix smiled. "But answer it." Hyunjin remembered his exact words. "Stay until the end." Memory shattered him, because Felix had been asking for reassurance all along, and nobody understood what he truly meant. A cold breeze passed through the trees. Hyunjin opened his eyes. Something white fluttered near the bench. A small folded piece of paper. Confused, he picked it up. The handwriting made his heart stop. Felix, immediately, undeniably, the note was short, painfully short. "If you come here, it means you still remember our promise." Hyunjin's hands trembled. Below it, another sentence appeared. "I'm sorry for leaving without explaining anything." His breathing became uneven. And finally, the last line. "I just needed to find out who I am when nobody expects me to be strong." Tears blurred his vision, not tears of despair, something else, understanding. For the first time, Hyunjin truly saw Felix, not as the sunshine everyone depended on, not as the person who always smiled, but as someone afraid, someone exhausted, someone desperately searching for himself. The setting sun painted the river golden. The world looked beautiful, bittersweet, alive. Hyunjin carefully folded the note and held it close to his chest. He finally understood. Felix hadn't run away from love. He had run away from the impossible expectations he placed upon himself. And somewhere out there, beneath the same endless sky, Felix was learning how to exist as simply Lee Felix, nothing more, nothing less. For the first time since that rainy night, Hyunjin smiled, a small smile, soft, hopeful, because maybe, just maybe, the road home wasn't gone. It was merely longer than anyone had expected. The following week arrived with an unfamiliar kind of quiet. Not the painful silence that had consumed the dormitory after Felix left. Something gentler, something that carried acceptance alongside longing. Hyunjin still missed him, every single day. But the ache inside his chest had changed. It no longer felt like a wound that refused to close. It felt like waiting for someone important to find their way through darkness. The note from the Riverside Park remained inside his wallet. He read it every morning, not because he wanted to cling to the past, but because those words reminded him that Felix was still somewhere out there trying to heal, and that mattered. One evening, while organizing old photographs, Han suddenly laughed. The sound surprised everyone. The members looked toward him. Han held up a Polaroid in the picture. Felix had somehow convinced Hyunjin to wear an absurdly large straw hat during a summer trip. Hyunjin looked completely miserable. Felix looked victorious. Changbin burst into laughter. "How did he even make you agree to that?" Hyunjin shook his head. "I still don't know." Room gradually filled with smiles. Stories emerged. Little memories, moments nobody had thought about in years. For the first time since Felix left, talking about him didn't only hurt, it brought warmth. Bang Chan watched quietly. His expression softened. He said, "He's still here," argued, because everyone understood. Love didn't disappear simply because someone needed distance. It remained, changing form, waiting patiently. Later that night, Hyunjin returned to his room. The moonlight spilled across the floor. The city beyond his window glowed softly. He sat at his desk and opened a blank sketchbook. For days, he hadn't been able to draw. The inspiration had vanished alongside Felix. But tonight felt different. His pencil moved naturally, lines appeared, gentle, careful. Without realizing it, he began drawing a familiar figure standing beneath falling rain, not sad, not broken, just walking forward, searching. The finished sketch looked peaceful, and somehow that frightened him, because peace meant acceptance. Acceptance meant acknowledging that Felix might not return tomorrow, or next week, or next month. Healing couldn't be rushed. The realization hurt, yet it also felt honest. A soft vibration interrupted his thoughts. His phone, unknown number. Hyunjin's heartbeat stopped. His hands trembled as he answered. Hello? Silence. The connection remained open. No voice came through, only faint sounds, wind, distant traffic, breathing. Then Hyunjin. The world froze. It was Felix. The voice sounded quieter than before, softer, yet unmistakably his. Hyunjin stood up so quickly that his chair nearly fell over. Felix. Another silence. Not uncomfortable, just careful. As though both of them feared that one wrong word might shatter the moment. Finally, Felix spoke again. I'm sorry. Simple apology carried enormous weight. Hyunjin closed his eyes. Thousands of emotions rushed through him at once. Relief, joy, pain, love, fear. He wanted answers. He wanted explanations. But more than anything, he wanted Felix to keep talking. You don't have to apologize, Hyunjin whispered. A small laugh came from the other end. You always say things like that. Familiar warmth in Felix's voice made Hyunjin's chest ache. For a moment, everything felt normal again, almost. I found your note, Hyunjin said quietly. The wind on Felix's side grew louder. I know, you knew I'd go there. I hoped you would. Tears threatened to form once more, not from sadness, from the overwhelming comfort of being understood. Even after leaving, even after all this time, Felix still knew him better than anyone. The night outside seemed impossibly still. The city lights flickered like distant stars. Hyunjin sat back down, afraid that moving too much might somehow end the call. Where are you? He asked softly. A long pause followed, somewhere peaceful. It wasn't really an answer. Yet Hyunjin respected it. The silence between them became gentle, familiar, the kind that only existed between people who had shared countless memories. Eventually, Felix spoke again. Been learning something. What is it? A quiet breath. That being loved isn't something you have to earn every single day. The words hit Hyunjin like sunlight after a storm, because that had always been Felix's greatest fear. The belief that his worth depended on how much happiness he could give others. The belief that people would leave if he stopped smiling. Hyunjin gripped his phone tighter. We never wanted perfection from you. I know that now. Answer came with surprising certainty. And for the first time, Hyunjin realized something important. Felix truly was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. The conversation continued. They talked about small things, the weather, the strange food Felix had been trying, a cat he kept seeing near wherever he was staying. Nothing dramatic, nothing profound, just ordinary moments. And perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. Eventually, the night grew deeper, the moon climbed higher, Felix grew quiet again. Pause. I'm still figuring things out. I know, I'm not ready to come back yet. Words hurt, but only a little, because Hyunjin had already prepared his heart for that possibility. He smiled, even though Felix couldn't see it. Take all the time you need. A soft exhale, relief, gratitude. I was afraid you'd be angry. Never. The answer came instantly, without hesitation, without doubt. The wind continued whispering through the phone. Then Felix laughed, a genuine laugh, one Hyunjin hadn't heard in what felt like forever. I missed you. Confession nearly broke him. I missed you too. Simple, honest. Enough. Minutes later, the call finally ended. No dramatic farewell, no promises, just one final sentence. Okay, Hyunjin. The screen went dark. The room returned to silence. But this time, the silence felt different, warm, hopeful, alive. Hyunjin walked toward the window. The night sky stretched endlessly above the city. Somewhere beneath those same stars, Felix was learning to breathe without carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. And here at home, someone would always be waiting, not to save him, not to fix him, but simply to welcome him back whenever he was ready. For the first time in many days, Hyunjin slept peacefully. And somewhere far away, Felix did too. Autumn arrived quietly. The city changed colors without asking permission. Trees along familiar streets transformed into shades of gold and crimson, and cool winds carried the scent of fallen leaves through the air. 2 months had passed. 2 months since the rainy night. 2 months since Felix had walked away with a suitcase and countless unspoken feelings. Life had continued, schedules resumed. Practices became normal again. Laughter returned to the dormitory little by little, yet there was still an empty chair during meals, still an instinctive glance toward the door whenever footsteps echoed in the hallway, still a space that belonged to only one person. Hyunjin learned how to live with missing someone. He didn't like it. But he learned. The phone calls with Felix became occasional, never regular, never predictable. Sometimes weeks passed without contact. Then suddenly, late at night, Hyunjin would receive a call. They talked about ordinary things, the stars, books, songs Felix had discovered, little moments that seemed insignificant yet somehow meant everything. Neither of them spoke much about returning. Not anymore, because healing wasn't a destination. It was a process. And Felix deserved the freedom to move at his own pace. One chilly evening, after finishing practice, Hyunjin found himself walking alone through the riverside park, the same place, the same bench. The river reflected the orange glow of sunset. Children chased one another nearby. Old couples walked hand in hand. Life remained beautifully ordinary. He sat down. A gentle breeze lifted strands of his hair. For the first time, the memories didn't hurt. Instead, they felt precious, like photographs kept safely inside the heart. A familiar voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Still coming here? Hyunjin froze. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Slowly he turned around, and the world stopped. Felix stood several steps away, wearing a simple hoodie, hands inside his pockets. Golden autumn leaves resting around his feet. The setting sun painted everything in warm colors. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Hyunjin couldn't breathe. His heart pounded violently. This had to be a dream, a cruel, beautiful dream. Yet Felix smiled, small, gentle, real. "Hi," he said softly. The sound of his voice shattered whatever composure Hyunjin had left. He stood immediately. Disbelief filled every part of him. "Felix." The name came out as a whisper. Felix nodded. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was overwhelming. Months of longing, months of unanswered questions, months of missing someone who felt like home, all condensed into a single moment. Hyunjin took a step forward, then stopped. Fear, the irrational fear that moving too quickly would cause everything to disappear. Felix noticed. His smile became warmer. "I'm really here." Words broke something inside Hyunjin. Without thinking, he closed the distance. Not running, not dramatic. Just walking towards someone he had missed with every part of his being. When they finally stood face to face, reality settled in. Felix looked different, not physically, something deeper. His eyes seemed lighter, calmer. The exhaustion that once lived inside them had softened. He looked at peace. The autumn wind danced around them. Leaves drifted across the pathway. Neither of them cared. "You came back," Hyunjin whispered. Felix looked toward the river. "Just for a little while." Answer was honest. And somehow that made it more beautiful. Hyunjin laughed quietly. "You still speak in riddles." A small chuckle escaped Felix. "Some habits don't change." Sound warmed Hyunjin's heart. How many nights had he missed that laugh? How many times had he imagined hearing it again? Too many. They sat together on the old bench, the same bench where countless memories lived. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was familiar, comfortable, home. Eventually, Felix broke it. "I was scared." Hyunjin turned toward him. Felix kept his eyes on the river. Of leaving, a pause, of coming back. Confession carried tremendous weight. "Why?" Felix exhaled slowly. "Because I thought everyone would see me differently." Breeze rustled the trees overhead. "I thought if I returned without having all the answers, people would be disappointed." His voice remained soft, careful. "But then I realized something." Hyunjin listened. Every word mattered. Felix smiled faintly. "Healing isn't about becoming perfect." The golden sunlight reflected in his eyes. "It's about allowing yourself to be imperfect without running away from the people who love you." The sentence lingered in the air, simple, beautiful, true. Hyunjin felt tears threatening once again, not painful tears, the kind born from relief. "You figured that out on your own?" Felix laughed. "Exactly." He reached into his pocket, carefully, slowly. A folded piece of paper appeared, old, slightly worn. Hyunjin recognized it immediately. The note he had left in Felix's room weeks earlier, the one he never expected Felix to read. Felix unfolded it. "I found this after I left." Hyunjin remembered every word he had written. "Take your time, find yourself, and when you forget who you are, remember that nobody here ever loved you only for your smile. They loved you because you were Felix. Nothing more was ever required." Felix held the paper carefully. "As ridiculous as it sounds," he said with a soft smile, "I must have read this 100 times. Emotion tightened Hyunjin's throat. "You kept it, of course." Answer came naturally, without hesitation. The sky gradually deepened into shades of pink and purple. Evening approached, yet neither of them wanted to leave. The world beyond the riverside seemed unimportant. After a long silence, Hyunjin asked the question that had lived inside his heart for months. "Are you happy?" Felix thought about it. Really thought about it, then he smiled. Not the bright smile he used to wear for everyone, not the perfect one, something quieter, something genuine, learning how to be. And somehow that was enough, more than enough. The wind carried fallen leaves across the river. The city lights slowly awakened in the distance. And for the first time since that rainy night, Hyunjin understood that love was never about holding someone so tightly that they couldn't leave. Sometimes, love meant letting them walk away long enough to find themselves, and welcoming them with open arms when they finally learned the way back home.